So welcome back to Leadership Soundbites with RokoM and Michele. And this week's episode is going to piggyback on last week's episode with Jim Britt, which it was almost like packing in 5 sound bites into one. It was so exciting. And so one of the things we want to unpack this week is decisions. So the power of decisions. And it was one of those traits that Jim talked about. And Roko and I both agreed, well, all of them were great. But this one we wanted to really spend some time and unpack a little bit more. And I want to start us with this quote. So it is, once you make a decision, the universe conspires to make it happen. That's Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I completely believe this. I mean, and I think it's in the law of attraction. If anybody's, seen or read The Secret, I think that's true.
Michele, for folks who haven't had the law of attraction or aren't familiar, say a little bit about it.
It is just this quote is that you're going to get what you put out into the world, right? Mm-hmm. So if you focus on all the things that could go wrong, all the things that you don't want in your life, the universe will give you those things that you don't want in your life. If you focus on the stuff that you want, right? The desires, the dreams, the aspirations, and that's what you put out there, that you will achieve it. You actually step in to feel like it's happened. What's that feeling that it happens? That's the stuff that you're going to get back.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of confirmation biases, right? Is that we're looking for those things to reinforce what we're already putting out there or thinking about. As you were talking, that's what it was reminding me of.
Yeah, well, it is, you're going to get back what you put out there. And we've done some other topics around the power of happy. And that filter that you filter stuff through. This is along those same lines. What I appreciated that Jim was talking about with the power of decisions, because when we first started talking about it, it was this, he had a different definition of decision than I was used to, right? And for me, it was like, in order for decision to have the meaning in your life and have power, if you will, there's conditions that have to be met. And part of those are there's got to be a commitment behind the decision. Mm-hmm. And it's not, and I think that's what happens at Roko, and you and I were talking, is that people look at decisions and they're almost like desires. Mm-hmm. Well, desires aren't going to be that powerful if they're not decisions, if they don't result in action, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it I think the core, if you will, is that commitment piece. And he did speak about it a little bit, where he said, they leave that escape route out open, right? So they may say they're committed. I'm in it 110%, but really what they're saying is, I'm in it until maybe something happens that I don't feel good, or it's too hard or whatever. Whereas when you make the decision, when he was saying it's binary, right? You're either going to do it or you're not. It's that commitment just to put every effort, be intentional about making it work. And there is no other path but that decision that you've made.
Which is a scary freaking place to be. All right. Because I know with me, like when I made the decision to, leave Sutter, I mean, the decision was made, but yet I kind of held my foot back a little bit, because I made the decision and threw my hat in the ring, but I didn't have to fully commit to it until like whatever last day of the month, whatever that was. And it was the last day of the month before I actually did the final thing. But once it was all in, there was actually relief that there wasn't an escape route anymore, that I'm all in. And then I think what happens is what Jim talked about, the actions that you take when the decision's made, and this is the path I'm going, now we can start getting a plan and start putting steps in place to be able to do that stuff, whatever that looks like. And I think lacking that, there's no plan.
Yeah. And it really does shift that mindset. So I told you, I said there were a couple of things that I took away from his stories and his, what he was sharing about decisions. And One of them was it determines how you show up.
Mhm.
And the second one was it creates your mindset. So when you fully commit, and I think all of us have an example of something that we committed to and we followed through and we saw the change that it made in whatever the circumstance was. We all have at least one of those stories, right? And so it creates that mindset that allows you to see the future, allows you to create the vision around what that end state is, and it keeps you motivated and it keeps you moving towards that path. But it's when you still have that door slightly open to escape out of that you're able to waffle and potentially distract you from that path.
You know, I wonder, Roko, as you're talking, some stuff came to mind for me. It's almost like chicken and egg, right? So does the decision come because you have clarity on where it is you want to go, and then you make the decision and commit to it? Or do you have clarity on what it is because you've made the decision? I mean, do you have to have the clarity about end state before the decision's made?
So here's my twist on it is I think you have to have the clarity on your decision, your commitment, right? So, you know, he talked about weight loss. For me, when he was talking about the story, I thought of my experience with deciding to run a marathon, right? Had never run that far in my life, always had done short distances. It was a busy time in my life. I had a young child. I was in a new job. There were lots of things going around. And to prepare for a marathon, it's a big commitment of time. You have to run at minimum 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And as you progress, the lengths of the run are longer. So you're not just taking up an hour of your day. Sometimes you're taking up 4 to 6 hours of your day. And then on the off days, you're doing sub trainings and things like that. So I didn't know truly what I hadn't visualized myself crossing the line for that marathon. And I hadn't even picked which marathon I would run, but I was clear on my decision that I was going to do it. And I was going to do whatever it took to make it happen. I didn't know the specifics of it. So that's my twist on what you were saying is I didn't have the vision completely thought out, but I at least had my commitment thought out that yes, I'm going to do it and I'm going to find a way to make it happen.
Well, I think that's the question, right? Is that for people listening, for us, it's, do you have to have all your ducks in a row and everything spelled out and everything else in order to make a decision, i.e. commitment, that this is what I'm going to do? And I think the answer is no.
Yeah.
Is that you can commit to do this thing. And then, the next thing Jim talked about were, actions that you take. And maybe these actions are fleshing that out.
Yeah.
Or to your point, you have to research, what does it take? What is all that stuff? Because you didn't necessarily know when you made the commitment that you were going to do this thing. And it's the same thing with, us in this podcast or, me launching Better Possibilities. The decisions were made, but I didn't have all the particulars. Like, what are my packages I'm offering, all the infrastructure you have, all the everything else like that. But the decision was made that this is a path I'm going down and this is what I want to do.
Yeah. And so what's coming to mind is the Tony Robbins quote that we talked about before at this stage. And it's a real decision is measured by the fact that you've taken a new action. If there's no action, you haven't truly decided.
I like that. And what jumped out at me in listening to it is the word new. So the decision is associated with the fact that you're doing something new, and new is different. New is not, I'm doing the same stuff that I've always done. And so I've made a decision. Well, maybe you have made a decision not to do anything different. So we're doing upside, because I think that's what you talked about is decision to create mindset, right?
Right.
And I think that's what Jim shared with us. And so it's like, you can make a decision with certainty, right? So you're closing the escape route. that I am not going to do anything to develop myself, or I'm not going to take any risk in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the mindset that you set yourself up for then is complete risk averse, and you're probably not going to have growth. You're not going to go out of your comfort zone. There's not going to be any of that stuff that's going to be change related, right? Versus a decision to say, you know what? I'm going to be open to pretty much anything that comes my way. I'm going to be open to growing and learning, exposing myself to new things all the time until the day I'm no longer in this physical body, right? Then the mindset's different. Mm-hmm. Because you're shifting to this thing of what's possible and growth, and you never, it never stops.
Right. And that follows then the universe conspires, right? Or this idea, it determines how you show up. And that's why those 2 points for me were just, it was like, oh, moment what he was talking about, you know, with this idea of the power, that decision making point.
Yeah. So I like it, the power of decision.
Yeah.
And don't get hung up in the details before it's made. It's that commitment that something's going to change. And I think that's it in its essence, right? Mm-hmm. Things are going to be different than they are today. And I've committed to that. Yeah. And you can fill in the blank, whatever that is.
Right.
I like it.
Yeah.
So what do we want people to walk away with? What's one thing that stands out for you?
Well, I think there's power in decisions, and the definition that we're presenting today around decisions is around the commitment that you make towards that decision. And I know this is more than one thing, but I go back to the 2 things that I took away. And when you make a decision, it determines how you show up, and it creates the mindset. It helps to create your mindset.
Yes. Thank you. 2's good. 2 for the price of 1.
2 for the price of 1.
I like it.
Thanks for letting me be verbose.
That's okay, Roko. I wouldn't stop you. The thing for me is the thing that I just hit on at the end of it now, or that you and I talked about earlier, chicken egg, is that don't not make it and commit because you think you've got to have all the answers and everything figured out. Commit to it first, whatever that thing is, that direction that you're going to start doing, and then start doing it, whatever those actions are to be able to support it. So I've enjoyed this. We still have energy from Jim's talk last week, and I'm sure that will carry on for weeks. We could have kept talking with him. And so hopefully you enjoyed our time this week on the power of decision. This has been RokoM Michele with Leadership Soundbites. And so we're having people like, share, and subscribe.
Send us your thoughts on what we should be talking about.
Yes, that's what I was just thinking. It's like, send us ideas on what topics that you want, because we've got flip charts full of ours. We want to hear from you too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.